so much of the early days of Liquid Death, like the story was shaped by, journalists who didn't fully get it. I mean, a lot of people didn't get it in the early days. Like, science, some of our early VCs, they understood it, but a lot of VCs, investors, like they didn't get it. Like they were like, oh, canned water. Yeah, what's that going to do? So most people, when they Google stuff, they see the old press articles, and there's everything from saying that I used to work at Netflix, which I never did. It was all because they just get things mixed up. Where that came from was Monster Energy used to sponsor a alternative music tour in the late 90s and early 2000s called the Warp Tour. And it was in partnership with Vans, the shoe company. And this was like the early energy drink days. I think Monster launched in 2002. Red Bull was, doing pretty well in the 90s. And energy drinks were basically buying up all of the alternative lifestyle culture because, nobody was giving money to punk bands and skateboarders and snowboarders and those kinds of people back then. Energy drinks did, but the bands who were on the tour, they didn't like drinking energy drinks. Like they're on tour, you're outside playing, like you kind of want to drink water or they want to drink beer. They don't want to drink, energy drinks. So obviously Monster didn't want, you're this growing brand, you're sponsoring this thing. It doesn't help you if the brand is drinking bottled water on stage. If the coolest guys in the place are not drinking your product, they found that was not going to be helpful to them. So what they did was they made cans of Monster that looked exactly like Monster, but it just had water in it. And they would give that to the bands to drink. It was not for sale. Clearly they were not in the water business, they were in the energy business. But when all the kids in the crowd were watching the bands, it looked like the bands were drinking Monster. So they're like, as a marketing thing. And I was friends with some of these bands, and we was hanging out with, backstage with them, and I remember just thinking, like, man, that's kind of a really uh, sneaky marketing thing. Like it's like, oh, all these kids think these guys are just pounding sugar and whatever, when in reality, these guys are drinking water and not. So that was like the first thing that kind of planted the seed in my brain of, how come healthy products don't market in the same fun, irreverent way as unhealthy products? And it's like, you look at what are the brands that really invest a lot of money in youth culture, humor, explosions, fun. It's alcohol, soda, candy, fast food, Bud Light, Cheetos, Snickers, Skittles, like all the junk food does all the fun marketing. Healthy stuff is very quiet. They more market to like an older demographic. That they don't do anything fun. But the reality was, like, a lot of these guys that played in bands or people that you think are alternative culture, and oh yeah, all these guys do is drink Monster Energy and eat bacon. It's like, no, these guys don't drink any of that. Most of them don't drink that stuff. They care about health. Half of them are vegan. A huge percentage of them are sober and don't drink alcohol. But it's been these brands that kind of still use them and own them from a marketing standpoint. And that was more what sparked kind of my thinking of Liquid Death, because I was into health at the time. My friends who were playing in these bands, they were into being healthy. And I think that was more of the seed, not so much like a rock star hydration problem. It was, oh yeah, how come there's not more healthy brands that have just as much fun with marketing as these unhealthy brands? It didn't make any sense to me. And then eventually that became Liquid Death years and years later.
You mentioned people thinking canned water. What? Like, what
Yeah.
is this? I
Yeah.
have to ask, when you speak to founders today, what do you advise founders when they're told, that's a silly idea, or why would you do that? What do you advise them when they're told that, like you were for so many years?
I think you have to be careful because, I mean, the reality is, out of every thousand ideas, 998 of them are bad and two are actually probably good. So I think you have to be careful that you're open to feedback and understanding what's happening and not just using the crutch of, oh, well, just because no one thinks this is smart, that it is smart. You know, it's easy to just kind of lean on, well, no one else gets this but me, but who cares? I'm just going to keep going down this road. You have to know, what are you measuring to know if this is good or not? Because even though people were telling us, oh, this doesn't make any sense, we had mountains of data showing that it did. You know, they just, a lot of these people were not privy to that data. Just on the surface, it was, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But when you could see, oh, without even having a real product, in 4 months, we have more social followers than Aquafina. And it's like, oh, look how many people are messaging us asking where they can get this. Look how many people are sharing images of a beverage product. Like, who shares an image of a beverage and how often on social media? Not too often. So we had all this data, which I think to folks that understood the digital world more, like science and some of the more tech side of things, I think they understood the power of that. Whereas, like, when we talk to more investor types on the traditional CPG side, they don't typically understand the digital social world as strongly. So they didn't know how to value some of this stuff as much as maybe the tech world kind of did in the early days.